So besides floating divs, a popular CSS technique is to put your items into lists and then float the individual list items. And that is what is happening here. So how could you get an image with some text in a row? So I have image, text, image, and then its corresponding text. And I have a whole row of these. Well, each one of these groups here, the image and the text, is actually an individual list item. So this whole thing is one list item. This is a list item. This is a list item. This is a list item, so on and so forth. And all of these list items are floated to the left. So just like in my last example, that means instead of stacking on top of each other, they're taken out of their natural order and they can go sideways, and they will extend in a row based upon the width that I give my entire UL. Okay, so you have a page there to work with, which is list start, and if you get stuck you can go to list finish, but I really want you to try to do it following along with me from list start. Okay, so here we are, and you can see what I mean by each one of these, the image and then the text. This is all one list item. All right, so if you want to do this, if you want to have the image with text and then another one image with text, put it all into a single list item together here. All right, so you can look through here and see I have a bunch of different LIs. So this is a really, really common technique that you'll see a lot of. Okay, so now we're going to go up into the CSS where I have like a little bit of a structure set up for you. The first thing I'm going to do is we're going to take these list items and we're going to float them to the left. Okay, so we're going to do float left. And let's see what that gives us. Oh my goodness, a complete chaos. All right, so they're like, what they're doing is, I'll just switch all to this view, is so this one still goes the full width of here and it leaves some space, so this one doesn't have space to move up, so this one moves up, and then they're all just trying to like jam into their whatever available space here. So this is not the way we want it to look yet. All right, so we have a little bit more work to do here, but that's our first step, is we floated them to the left. The next thing is, let's give them all a width. Okay, so I know that my images are width of 150, so now I'm going to give them a width of 150 px. Okay, so now this is starting to look better. So what's happening is the individual list items, remember the image and the text, I've made each individual one 150 pixels. And I came up with that number based on my image here. And so now they're starting to be able to kind of go next to each other a little bit, although it still is not very orderly. You see these people, I was going to say people, you see individual list items trying to pop up where there's a little bit of space. So we still have quite a bit of work to do in terms of controlling it. All right, the next thing that we can do is go into our UL and let's give that an overall width. So that way, instead of these guys just continuing to repeat until it hits the end of our container div, they will drop down once they can no longer fit into the space I've just set up for the UL. So if I give the UL, so this is hashtag main UL, a width of 680 pixels, let's see what's going to happen now. And I click over here. Okay, so there was some text that had crept up here, it didn't belong, and this popped down. So what I'm doing now, let's move this out of the way, is I am actually controlling how many of these are going side by side. But one of the biggest problems is that this one up here sees this available space and it's trying to jump up. So we are going to stop that by giving our individual list items a height attribute. And I'm going to give it 325 px just as a number that I've come up with and tweaked a little bit, but you could try different numbers. So the number I'm looking for is the height of the one of my columns that has the most amount of text. So it's really this one that I'm trying to target. So I'm trying to figure out what is this entire height here. And so you kind of keep plopping in numbers and targeting until everything starts to drop down below this. Okay, so now I've given each individual list item a width. That's what controls the width of the text down here. I'm trying to get it to wrap down. I gave my overall UL a width. That's what controls how many of these stack here in the row. Then I gave it all my list items a height. That is what prevents these guys from popping up if they see some available space, because now this is no longer whatever this height was. See how I get that back there. When I hover, you could see that outline for a second. Well, this is no longer this height. This is not ending at this height. These all have the height of 325. So it's actually, it's clear here. Yeah, there you go. You can see my red outline. That is the height for each one of those boxes, and that is what's pushing the next row down to where it is. So just to illustrate, if I gave it more height, I'll make it 525, each individual one, you'll see these guys pop down even more. Okay, if I decrease this width, I'll put 400, oops, then I can only have 2 of them. So the overall UL is going to control how many of those are in a row. All right, so let's undo that though. Okay, so here we are. So what are some of the other things left that we can do? Well, we could add a little bit of padding, and we need to get rid of the bullet also. So I'm going to get rid of the bullet under the hashtag main UL, and that is list style type none. Okay, that got rid of my bullet over here. I can also center my overall UL by using my margin left and right auto. All right, that moves that over. And for my list items, I'm going to give them a little bit of space in between. So that's a little bit of padding. Padding on the left of 10 pixels, and I'll do padding on the right of 10 pixels. Okay, and that is giving them a little bit of space in between. If I want to have some additional space above here, we saw that I could either increase my height here, or I could give a little bit of padding to the top of my list items as well, such as padding 50 pixels. To increase that space in between my 2 different rows. And lastly, what's going on with my footer? My footer is saying, this is the footer, please help me stay at the bottom. And it's certainly not staying at the bottom. So what we have to do is we have to clear it. So let's go into where it says footer, and we're going to clear both. So we're saying clear both. That means if you're floating something to the left, it'll clear it. If you're floating it to the right, it'll clear it. We are only floating to the left, but remember I said, like, it's very flexible, this kind of layout, so I would recommend clearing on both directions in case you decided you wanted to switch things to the right. Okay, and that made our footer go down to the bottom. Then there are just some other couple of small tweaks you could do. I think adding a little bit of padding onto our main or something like that. But this is the general idea. And our UL, we set the width. That controls how many goes across. We get rid of our bullets and we center it. In our individual list items, we float them, and then we give them a width to be able to control. Without that width, this text would have been to the side over here. Then we give them a height, targeting, trying to figure out the height of our tallest column here, and that pushes these guys down onto the next level. Give a little bit of padding for design onto the sides and onto the top. Okay, and now we're going to apply this kind of technique to a few more layouts.